So, today we're going to get into something really fascinating. The story of how the rulebook for the world's largest democracy actually came to be. Yep, we're talking about the Constitution of India.
Just think about it for a second. How on earth do you write a single rulebook for a nation with such immense diversity, especially one that's just emerging from centuries of colonial rule? I mean, this was the massive question facing India's founders. After the British left and the subcontinent was painfully partitioned, their job wasn't just about writing laws. No, it was about creating a national identity from scratch, a framework to hold everyone together. The stakes? They were unbelievably high.
So to really appreciate what they pulled off, we've got to dive into the sheer scale of the challenge. And trust me, it was something the modern world had never really seen before. You know, the journey to this point was a long one. The British had this 1935 Act, which was kind of a blueprint, but it completely failed to bring the princely states into the fold. Then comes 1947, the Independence Act. Well, it didn't just give freedom, it ripped the subcontinent in two. So India basically had to start all over again, drafting a brand new constitution for a sovereign nation. That document was finally adopted in 1949 and came into full force on January 26, 1950, which is why we celebrate Republic Day. Seriously, just try to picture it. You've got the provinces of British India on one hand, and on the other, more than 500 princely states, each with its own ruler. And on top of that, a population speaking thousands, yes, thousands, of different languages. So the job wasn't just writing laws. It was about stitching this incredibly complex, diverse tapestry into one single nation. It was a monumental task, to say the least.
So who were the people given this almost impossible job? Well, let's get into the architects of India's constitution.
Right here, in these halls, this is where the Constituent Assembly, made up of indirectly elected representatives, got to work. And get this, they spent almost 3 years, 2 years, 11 months, and 17 days to be exact, debating, arguing, and carefully crafting every single word that would shape India's destiny.
And one of the biggest decisions they made is explained perfectly by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was the chairman of the drafting committee. He made a powerful case for a parliamentary system. Why? Because he believed it would prevent clashes between the legislature and the executive. For a brand new, incredibly diverse, and kind of fragile democracy like India, keeping the branches of government from fighting each other was absolutely critical for stability.
Okay, here's a little fact that I find absolutely amazing. The entire original Constitution. It wasn't typed or printed, nope, it was handwritten in gorgeous calligraphy by just one man, Prem Bihari Narayan Razada. Can you imagine? It's literally a work of art, a one-man marathon that turned a legal document into a masterpiece.
All right, let's move on to the philosophy at the heart of the document. You see, the preamble, it's not just some fancy introduction, it's the soul of the Constitution. It's the promise of what this new India was meant to be.
Now, the word socialist itself was actually added to the preamble much later, in 1976, but you could say the spirit of it was there from the start. And we need to be clear, this wasn't about Soviet or Chinese-style communism. It was India's own brand of democratic socialism. The idea was a mixed economy, where both government and private companies would work together to tackle the crushing poverty and inequality that colonialism had left behind.
Similarly, the word secular means something very specific in the Indian context. It's not about building a wall between religion and the government. Not at all. It's about the state being impartial, treating every single religion with equal respect. Think of it as positive engagement with all faiths, not disengagement from them.
And this comparison really spells out the difference, doesn't it? In the West, you typically see a strict separation of church and state. It's a private matter. But in the Indian model, it's more like the state keeps a principled distance. It can actually support religious activities for all communities. But, and this is a big but, it also has the power to step in and reform harmful practices done in the name of religion. So the key takeaway here is that religion is seen as a part of society, not just something you do in private.
And finally, we have Democratic Republic. Let's break that down. Democratic, simple enough. The government is elected by the people. Republic, this means the head of state is not a king or queen, it's a president who's elected for a fixed term. Put them together, and what do you get? A system where the ultimate power, the real sovereignty, stays with the people of India. Period.
Okay, so now that we've covered the philosophy, let's talk about the actual nuts and bolts, the architecture of the government. How did the Constitution manage to balance power between a central government and all those different states? Well, the answer is in its pretty unique structure.
The term that gets thrown around a lot is quasi-federal. What does that even mean? Well, it's a bit of a hybrid. It's federal because power is divided between the central government and the states. But, and this is the crucial part, it leans towards having a very strong central government. This wasn't an accident. It was a compromise made on purpose. After the trauma of partition, the founders were terrified of the country breaking apart. So the goal was to give states some freedom, but make absolutely sure that national unity always came first.
And hey, this wasn't just something Indians called themselves. Even international experts saw how unique it was. The political scientist K.C. Ware is actually the one who came up with the term quasi-federal, pretty much to describe India's system. It just didn't fit into the usual boxes, you know? It wasn't purely federal like the US, and it wasn't unitary like the UK. It was its own thing.
This table breaks it down really well. Look, India has a written constitution, just like the US, except it's the longest in the world. It's got a parliamentary system, kind of like the UK, but it also divides power like a federal system. And our president, a ceremonial head of state, not a powerful executive like in the US. So you can see, it's a real mix and match, a true hybrid.
And if you want the single most powerful example of this strong center, here it is.
In the US, they say it's an indestructible union of indestructible states. In India, it's an indestructible union of destructible states. Think about that. The central parliament in India has the power to literally redraw the map, change state boundaries, change their names, or even get rid of a state altogether, often without that state's permission. It's an immense power, and it's all there for one reason: to protect national unity at all costs.
Okay, for our final section, let's talk about the secret to the Constitution's survival. Its greatest strength isn't what's written in it, but the fact that it was never meant to be set in stone. It was designed to be a living document, one that could breathe and evolve right along with the nation.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The proof is right there in the numbers. As of 2023, the Constitution has been amended 106 times. That's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. Every single one of those amendments is the Constitution adapting to new challenges, new ideas, and the changing dreams of the Indian people. That flexibility, that's the real secret to why it's lasted. So how do they do it? How do you change the Constitution? Well, Article 368 lays out the rules, and it's a very clever balancing act. They made it tough, but not impossible. For most things, you need a special majority in Parliament, more than half the total members and 2/3 of those voting. But if the change affects the states, you also need at least half of the state legislatures to agree. So it's not easy, it's a very deliberate process. And that balance just shows how much foresight the makers of the Constitution had. They were smart enough to know they couldn't possibly predict everything the future held for a country as massive and complex as India. So they didn't give us a rigid set of rules. Instead, they gave us a flexible framework, something future generations could adapt to face their own unique challenges.
And this brings us back to Dr. Ambedkar, who really put it perfectly. He said, "The Constitution is not a mere lawyer's document. It is a vehicle of life, and its spirit is always the spirit of age." What a powerful idea, right? It's not just a rule book. It's alive. Its spirit has to keep up with the times to stay relevant for every new generation.
And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The story of India's constitution, it's not over. It's still being written every single day. So the big question for all of us isn't just about what was written back then. It's about how this foundational rulebook will keep evolving. As the world's largest democracy continues to change, how must this incredible vehicle of life change with it to guide the journey?